Hey everybody, Raul here for Bass Musician Magazine, and today we have the extraordinary honor and pleasure of chatting with bassist Dane Alderson. Yay!
How's it going, folks? And Raul, it's such a pleasure to be chatting with you.
Oh, it's totally my pleasure, Dane. For those of you that are going, Dane looks familiar to me. You may have seen him with the Yellowjackets, and he's been with them coming on 10 years now, so you've had ample opportunities. We're going to talk a lot about that, but Dane, going to the past, how did you get started on music and particularly in bass?
Oh my goodness. Well, I was very lucky. I come from a fairly musical family. My dad, Rick, he's a drummer, and he taught me drums. There were photos of me as a 2-year-old kid sitting behind the drum kit with him holding the sticks in my hands. So he taught me drums from an early age, and I grew up jamming out to Joe Cocker and Stevie Wonder, and my mother and my sister are both music lovers. They don't play instruments, but they were always into 60s music and a lot of pop music as well, and all that stuff. So I grew up in an amazing environment. It was music all the time. And so I started out as a drummer. That was the plan. I was gonna be a drummer. I was gonna study drums, and that's how it was all gonna go. And then I was probably around 11 years old, and my stepbrother at the time introduced me to the Chili Peppers.
Okay.
And like, dare I say it, so many other bass players, once I heard Flea, once I heard everything that he was doing, that changed everything for me, man. I wanted to be a bass player immediately. It was the album Blood Sugar, Sex Magic, and One Hot Minute, the 2 Chili Peppers albums. That I'd never heard a bass guitar sound like that before, and there was something about the sound and his technique and his approach. It was just dirty and raw, and his slap technique, and something clicked in my brain, and I wanted to be a bass player ever since. So around about from the age of 13, I started focusing on bass. And that's really how it all began. But my drumming upbringing, my earliest musical love was heavy metal. I was Metallica and Pantera. Those 2 bands, that was my whole life. I used to fall asleep with headphones on, as a little kid, listening to Metallica and Pantera. And I have to give a shout out to Guns N' Roses as well. They were a huge musical influence for me growing up. And so, and I begged my dad for Christmas one year to get me a set of double kick pedals. And, that was my whole life, heavy metal drumming, Lars Ulrich and Vinnie Paul from Pantera. But being introduced to the Chili Peppers, that kind of got me listening to funk, and what gradually led me into fusion and jazz. And my dad saw the transformation that was happening, and he was like, well, mate, I have a few vinyls here, a few albums I think you might be interested in. And that's how it all started. So I've been a bass player since around about the age of 13.
Nice. Now, did you pursue further studies or training? Or are you self-taught?
I had a few teachers growing up. There was a gentleman, his name is Tony Gibbs. He's a kind of a local legend in Perth, Australia. My dad was friends with a couple of colleagues of him, and so I started seeing Tony for some lessons, and he, showed me the basics, showed me some technical stuff, how to play the instrument. He got me started with reading music, and I was really lucky with my drumming upbringing, drums and bass, of course. We have so much in common, and I was learning off a lot of drum rudiment books. So that got me reading rhythms and recognizing rhythms from a pretty early age. So that really helped. Really helped my slap technique as well, like just using my thumb as the kick drum, and whatever finger I was plucking with as the snare. So I would use drum rudiment and drum groove books and just kind of apply it to the bass guitar. So Tony and I would do a lot of that, and he introduced me, showed me his album collection and got me listening to a wide range of bass players that I'd never heard of before. So I did a Bachelor of Jazz degree at the West Australian Academy of Performing Arts, or WAPA, as we like to refer to it. And that was a life-changing experience. I auditioned for WAPA while I was still in high school, because I've been a musician. I've been performing since I was 11. I've only ever been a musician. I've never had a job before. Not a paper route, nothing. I started doing gigs on drums when I was 11. So I knew from an early age what I wanted to do, and that was my goal and my focus. And my parents said, okay, well, why don't you audition for the academy? And I did, and I managed to get in a year early. My parents were a little bit concerned, even though, they both knew that I knew what I wanted to do. And my dad being a musician, they were like, mate, probably, finish school, you've gotten this far and everything. But I knew what I wanted to do, and I was really, really passionate about it. And they saw that in me, and so I went for it. And I'm really glad I did, because the people that I met and the things that I learned at that stage of my life in my musical development at the academy, it was just a really good timing, and it got me opportunities that I might have missed had I not pursued it.
Indeed. Now, with that, one of the things that happens a lot of times in music education is you have networking and you make connections and opportunities come up. So from Australia, again, the Yellowjackets have been playing together for 50 years, and you're coming on 10 with them. How did you either get on their radar, or how did you manage to join the band?
So I was born in Sydney, but I grew up in Perth, and I lived in Perth for nearly 29 years. And I made the move to the US back in 2012.
Okay.
My mother, Judy, is the American one of the family. She's from New Jersey originally. And her and my sister, they moved to Virginia here, Charlottesville, Virginia, maybe 24 years ago now, to be with my mum's side of the family. And my sister always wanted to visit the US. And so they both came over here, and they never came back to Australia.
Oh.
They loved it, which was kind of the plan for them. But I hadn't visited them or seen them for it was probably coming up to 3 or 4 years. And my living situation in Perth changed slightly. And I thought, well, you know what? I really want to get to the US. I really want to pursue my career more in the US. And my goal was always to, move to New York. And as so many jazz musicians, we gravitate towards New York, usually at some point. So I moved to Charlottesville, Virginia in 2012.
Wow.
And when I first moved, I was doing some really cool singer-songwriter gigs and some folk type of gigs, stuff that I hadn't done too much of back in Perth. But it was great. It was just a complete change of scenery and a change of everything, basically. So then 2015 comes along. It was, I remember it was winter. Most of my gigs had been canceled. We had snowstorms and my life at the time, it was a little bit up and down. I was thinking, I'm probably going to head back to Australia at some point. There's a few things. I don't know if it's quite working out. And then I wake up one morning and I have an email from Will Kennedy. And it basically said, hey, Dane, man, we're looking for a new bass player, and we saw some videos of you on YouTube. Would you like to do some gigs with us? And Raoul, I thought it was a joke, man. I thought someone was having me on, and it was first thing in the morning. I woke up, but it was real. The guys had seen some videos of me playing with a few bands on YouTube. And Will Kennedy recognized one of the drummers that I was working with, a good friend of mine, Andy Fissenden, incredible drummer from back home. And so Will got in touch with Andy, got my details, And I had my first gig in Denver, Colorado with the Jackets. That was kind of my audition. But, I knew an opportunity like this, I mean, first of all, just doesn't come along very often. And I knew that this was a 1 in a million shot. So I thought, okay, I'm going to go all out for this. So the guys sent me, I think, maybe 15 tunes, most of the tunes of which I'd never heard before. I had about a month to prepare, and I just memorized everything.
Wow.
So I was falling asleep listening to the music, in my car, doing dishes, listening to the music, and singing melodies and trying to remember grooves and, saying the chords out loud, in this section. And so I rocked up to the gig, and I was as prepared as I possibly could be. And the guys really appreciated that. If there's any advice I could give any aspiring musicians, if you're lucky enough to have, some of your heroes reach out to you, or you have an opportunity to play with them, going that extra mile and memorizing as much as you can, and it really goes a long way, and it certainly did in my case. The guys were extremely appreciative, and it was a really good start to the journey.
Nice.
Yeah.
When you join a group that is as established as the Yellowjackets are, you're filling shoes of who came before you. But by this same token, when the nature of jazz and fusion and all that, it seems like you'd have a lot of flexibility to make it your own as well. You guys have a new record coming up, Fasten Up. I'm sure there's a lot more of you in this now than there was when you started out with the group originally. Tell us, how is this process of you incorporating your creative footprint on the music?
Absolutely. Well, actually, it's really interesting you bring that up. As I was memorizing this music and listening to it every day for a month, I was hearing all of Jimmy's grooves and Jimmy's solos. And, he's obviously someone I respect greatly, and what a phenomenal bass player and musician he is. But you're absolutely right. I had to also approach this from my own perspective and inject my own musicianship. And the guys were very clear and open about that from the very beginning. And they were very trusting of me and still are, I hope. And they're just like, man, if you hear something, if you regardless what it is, if, we're in a solo section, you want to change the harmonies a bit, or if you've got some pedals or effects, we trust you. And their musicianship is at such a high level, they'll hear what I'm doing and they'll go with it. So they were very, very open about that from the beginning. So what I did, on just using Logic on my MacBook, I put together a bunch of their tunes, whether it was groove sections or solo sections. So I had bassless tracks, that I could practice with. And, and even sort of prepare if I had a few ideas or was hearing a few things, I could kind of record something on my laptop and this kind of works here. And, here's another idea that kind of works. And so that's kind of how I started the approach to really get my voice in there, But it was tricky at first because, hearing all of their classic tunes and Jimmy's classic grooves and stuff, and it did take a minute to, on stage, kind of break away from that and really get into my own thing. And it's an ever-evolving process. This is my 5th album with the band. I believe it's the band's 27th album.
Indeed.
And I remember Bob Mintzer saying a very similar thing. Bob came into the band, with he has a pretty specific way of writing music, or, he uses his techniques when composing. And he, of course, plays how he plays, but adjusting to a band that has such a history, I remember Bob relating with me, it took him a while to adjust and get used to the compositional methods of the band as a whole. And Will Kennedy's groove, which is, so amazing and incredible, but, adjusting to that, to a band that has such a rich history like this band does, It took him a minute as well. We chatted about it, but man, coming on 10 years now, I mean, it's been such a journey, and I've contributed 5 songs to the band so far.
Okay.
And 2 of which are on our latest album, Fasten Up. I've always been more of a performer and a player. I've written music over the years, but never considered myself, certainly not a prolific composer by any means. But being in this band, the guys were and are very encouraging. You know, they're like, Dane, bring in some ideas. It doesn't matter what it is. It could just be a groove you're working on, or a melody, or a set of chord changes. And they really pushed me into getting my compositions in motion and really focusing more on that side. So that's been great. That's been really cool.
Nice. Well, and since we're mentioning what you're adding to the music, we should probably talk also how you're getting your sound. What are you playing on?
Well, for many years, I'd say maybe 13 or 14 years, I was using a Yamaha TRB. I performed a lot with an amazing musician, a fella named James Morrison. He's kind of he's an Aussie jazz legend back home. And I was very lucky. I won his scholarship when I was 19 years old. James has the Morrison Scholarship that he awards to kids under the age of 19. And I won it, I believe it was 2002, and the prize was a Yamaha instrument.
Oh, nice.
And I was really into, and I still am, but at the time, John Patitucci. And my bass teacher at the academy, Paul Pooley, at the time said, man, why don't you get a 6-string? You know, that's something you really seem to be gravitating towards. And so I did. From the Morrison Scholarship, I got the Yamaha TRB. And that was a beautiful instrument and indestructible as well. I toured all over the world with James with that. And for the first part of the Yellowjackets gigs, I was using that bass. But I met a gentleman by the name of David Siegel from a company called New York Bass Works. He hit me up. He's a huge Yellowjackets fan. And he said, Dane, I'd be really interested in designing you an instrument if you'd like to work together. And I said, absolutely, man, let's do this. And so I've been working with New York Bass Works now for, I'd say, maybe 6 or 7 years. And I have 3 of David's instruments. We developed a beautiful 6-string that has a built-in MIDI system, which was so much fun. I have the Roland V-Bass unit that I use a lot for recording now. I don't travel with it as much, just with the challenges and restrictions of traveling. You know, we kind of have to travel lighter and lighter as the years go on. But we developed this 6-string, which is absolutely beautiful. And I also have a 5-string fretless that he built for me, which is gorgeous. I've used that on the last couple of Jackets recordings. And also my most recent addition is a P-bass that he built for me.
Oh, nice.
And now the P-bass is an instrument I've always loved. I'd never owned one, but it was a whole new territory for me. I mean, you know, my other instruments have got beautiful pickups and preamps with all these knobs and controls and switches and ramps, and so to then go to a P-bass with basically one pickup to pivot my thumb on, and you know, just the meat and potatoes of the bass guitar, basically. It was really cool, and kind of I had to change the way I approached the instrument. I took it on a couple of Jackets tours and was touring with the Jackets on a 4-string P-bass with flat wound strings. And it was a beautiful instrument. And I use it on one of the tunes on the latest album, on Fasten Up, on the title track.
Nice.
Yeah. So yeah, I have 3 instruments from New York Bass Works, and they're absolutely beautiful. And David is a extremely thorough and very talented luthier. He's made some beautiful instruments.
Nice. Well, and you mentioned your flat wound strings. Do you have a particular brand of strings that you prefer?
The brand on my basses at the moment, the flat wound strings are D'Addarios. I've been trying out these D'Addario coated strings, the XL coated strings, I believe they're called. I was and still do use Elixir strings every now and again. The coated technology, not only do they feel great under your fingers, but they just last so much longer, and you can get away. I don't have to change my strings for 2-3 months sometimes. No. Which is great, but I'm trying out these D'Addario coated strings at the moment, which are really nice and which I believed I used on Fasten Up on the latest recording.
Very cool, very cool. And amplification or any other elements to your sound chain?
Absolutely. So I've been using Aguilar amplifiers since my first album with the Jackets, since back in 2015. Mm-hmm. Coherence was the name of that album. My preferred setup, I have a 1x15 on the bottom and an SL, the cabinet, the super light cabinet, and an SL 2x10 on top of that. And that's what I use at home, and that's what I use in the studio as well. So I have a direct line going straight into the desk. I have those two cabinets mic'd up in a separate room in the studio. And so my sound is basically a mix and a blend of all of those signals. But I have to say the 1x15, the sound of that cabinet, we used a fair bit of that in the final mix. And I love the Aguilar cabinets. And an AG700 Aguilar head.
Okay.
That's an amp head that I've had maybe for a couple of years now, but it's just beautiful. I'm in love with those cabinets, and Aguilar, the amplifiers and technology, super reliable and just really lovely amplifiers to use.
Very nice, very nice. So as we look ahead, again, recent release of Fasten Up. What's in the works for the future? What are the plans?
Well, Fasten Up, it will certainly be out and released very soon. Actually, this Friday, the 21st, mm-hmm. It'll be released. This year is full of tours. We have a lot of dates. We're touring. I think we have 3 tours of Europe booked.
Nice.
2 of which are going to be with the great Kurt Elling. We're going to be doing a Weather Report tribute with Kurt Elling, which is going to be amazing. I mean, Weather Report, Yellowjackets, Kurt Elling, that's like a triple whammy for me. So just going to have a big smile on my face up there. But working with Kurt is something I've dreamed of for a long time. I've been a huge fan of his for many years. So this year, we're really going to be promoting and pushing this album. The Yellowjackets, this is my main gig at the moment. Here in Charlottesville, I have a studio here, so I lay tracks down for folks and for various bands and people. I teach a little bit. I'm constantly working on and composing for my own project. I've been saying this for years, and I need deadlines, Raoul. That's the only way I can get anything done. So I'm got to set a deadline for this at some point. But releasing my own album is something that's been in the works for a little while, but I'm getting closer and closer to doing that, hopefully very soon.
I totally agree. For me to get anything done, I have to write it on a list. Either it's on paper or on my whiteboard so that I can have the achievement of sweeping it off.
Outside of the Yellowjackets, that's my main focus at the moment. I've worked with some incredible bands over the years, and I always considered myself, a session musician. I never kind of saw myself as a front man. I'd always loved just kind of more being in the background, just, grooving out, trying to make bands sound as good as I can, supporting, the front person, and that's always been what I've gravitated towards. So a solo project with my name out front, that's something that I'd really love to get off the ground. There was a band I worked with in Australia for many years called Void, VOID, with the great Troy Roberts, fella named Troy Roberts, saxophonist. He lives in New York now. He has his own project, an incredible band called New Jive, and he tours with everyone. He was touring with the late, great Joey DeFrancesco for many years, and Jeff Tain Watts, and a whole slew of big names. And the drummer Andy Fissenden, who I mentioned earlier, who Will had worked with at I think a modern drummer festival in Australia. He's the drummer on The Voice now, the
Okay.
Australian version of the TV show The Voice. And the pianist was an incredible player, a guy named Tom O'Halloran, who's still in Perth. He teaches at the academy where we all studied. So a Void reunion at some point is something that we've chatted about for a long time. And certainly with an original project of mine, I would love to get my former Void members involved in that, which would be amazing. We released one album back in 2006. But we all, as everybody does, the band didn't break up as such, but we all just started doing different things. Troy moved away, then I eventually moved away. Andy moved to Melbourne, Tom moved to Sydney. But that's a project that we would really like to do some more with in the near future. And I'm always very humbled. There are folks who come up to me at Jackets gigs and ask about Void. It was an amazing time of my life, especially on my musical journey. I learned so much playing with those guys, and so absolutely, that's a project I'd love to get back into the mix again for sure. But yeah, at the moment it's jackets, and yeah, and like I said, we have a lot of dates coming up this year, so I'm really excited to be playing all of this new music and getting it out there for the folks. And I mean, the Jackets repertoire, the guys have hundreds of tunes. And there's about somewhere between 70 and 80 tunes in rotation at the moment, so which is great. I mean, it then keeps every gig every night completely fresh, so it's always a surprise. We do plan sets, but we'll always choose a few tunes we haven't played in a while, so we're always on our toes and always thinking, and there's a lot of that going on. So yeah, but the Jackets are keeping me really busy at the moment, and it's just, I mean, what an amazing, it's coming up to 10 years and I still can't believe that I'm playing bass with this band. It's crazy.
Very nice. Well, there's so much exciting stuff coming down the pike. If people want to know, because I'm sure they're getting, okay, where can I see the Jackets, or where can I maybe see Void when you guys get together? The best place to look for Yellowjackets is probably yellowjackets.com.
That's right, yellowjackets.com. We have a few pages on Facebook, a fans page and an official page. Those are the best places to go to for current gig dates and any new projects or anything that any of us are working on. And yeah, so those are the best ways to get in touch with us, our website and Facebook, really. Yeah.
Got you. And if they want to look at any of your particular projects, is there a place that they should be looking?
I'm on Facebook as well. I have a YouTube page. I think I'm the only person without an Instagram at the moment. I'm ashamed to say, but that's all going to change very soon. My social media chops are in dire need of some rewiring, if you will. So that's something I'm going to be getting together this year, because I meet so many amazing people, especially with the Jackets touring the world and doing all of these gigs. And social media, I mean, it's such an important part of what we do for creative people to get their work out there and to meet and connect with other people. So Instagram will be a way to get in touch with me very, very soon. I'm so terrible, Raul. I can only hide from the social media aspect for so long. But yeah, it's very important. It needs to be done for sure.
Well, there's only so many hours in the day, and I'm sure so many things that have a lot more attractiveness versus spending time working on social media. But again, we'll be looking forward to that. Dane, we appreciate you taking time to chat with us. Tell us about your journey, the Jackets, everything else. Folks, you've seen him here on Bass Musician Magazine, Dane Alderson.
Such a pleasure, Raul. Thank you so much, and all the best. Hope to meet you in person.
Indeed. Thank you.
No worries.